Hello, everyone. Today is November 30th, 2022. My guest today is Katie Stein. Katie is a small animal veterinarian. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Katie.
Thanks for inviting me. This is a really cool opportunity.
Yes, it's a very cool opportunity for me too. So, how did you decide to become a veterinarian?
Um, it was like a combination of random events that occurred my first year of undergrad. Like I knew I wanted to do a career in biology, but I didn't really know what because I didn't really like the idea of being a human doctor. I didn't really like the idea of going into teaching or like research. So I kind of was scrambling for something to do. And then like my dog got sick. Um, so we had to take her to a couple of vets. And I was really struck by how warm and caring they were. And I had always really loved animals. It had been something that when I was younger, I thought, oh, I'm going to be a veterinarian, in the way that kids say, oh, I'm going to be an astronaut or a basketball player or whatever. So then it kind of put it into perspective of, no, this is actually a career option. So that got me thinking about that. And then I got hypnotized at a freshman like comedy show. Um, and the end of the show, the like hypnotist said, "You're gonna make a decision. Doesn't matter what about, but you're gonna make a decision right now, and you're gonna be confident in that decision." And I remember thinking to myself, "I'm gonna be a veterinarian." And they snapped their fingers. I woke up and I was like, "Yep, I'm gonna try it," because there was a lot of kind of just critical thinking and decision making that I really enjoyed that process. And I'd always loved biology, so obviously there was a lot of being able to know the pathways of the body. And so the more I did it, I just kind of stuck with it, and eventually applied to veterinary school, got in, and then became a vet and realized I didn't want to do it. So kind of
Wow.
like, yeah, it was a full kind of like 4 years of really hard effort to then be like, oh, this is actually not for me.
What made you realize you don't want to do it? Or what about veterinarian makes you say that, being a veterinarian?
It's very so there's all types of veterinarians. I'll start by saying, you can be a researching veterinarian. You can be some veterinarian that teaches veterinary students. But most people, when they think about veterinarian, is somebody who's in a practice actually doing medicine, right? And regardless of whether you're doing cats and dogs or pigs and cattle, you're very much dealing with the people. Like a lot of it, you do need to have the medicine. The medicine is the main foundation for all your decision making. But the majority of the job is focusing on, you need really strong communication skills. You need to have really good like resilience in terms of your emotional boundaries, which is something I was not very good at and still something that I'm working on. And you need to be able to make a lot of ethical decisions and convey those to people who might not agree with you or want to do what you see. And at the end of the day, the decision is out of your hands. You can only, unless there's clear forms of something illegal happening or animal abuse, at the end of the day, animals are considered the property of their owners or their farmers. As a veterinarian, you are able to recommend decisions for them to make, and you're able to report them if they decide not to do those decisions. But that's all you can really do at the end of the day. So if you think, hey, I think we should really go forward with this treatment, it's what they really need because they're painful and they're going to be suffering, but your client is saying, that sounds expensive, I don't really trust you, we're just going to wait and see. You just kind of have to be like, okay, we're going to wait and see. Like, please sign this form saying I advised you and you're going against my medical decision, but that's all I can have you do. So it was really taxing for me. I kind of knew going into it that it would be a lot of the people that I would be dealing with. And so initially I thought I was going to be an emergency veterinarian, because then you have a lot less continuous relationships with people. You have people who come in for immediate things that need fixing, you fix them or you don't fix them, and then it's done. Whereas if you're in general practice, it's very much establishing relationships with clients, because you're going to be seeing them for years to come, and you want to make sure that, you know, they trust you, they respect your decision, so that you can continue providing the care that the animal needs. But then I realized being an emergency vet requires a lot of working odd hours, a lot more education. Like, most people require internships, which I wasn't keen on doing. And so then it kind of fell into, well, I either go into research or practice. Now, no interest in research, so I went into practice. And again, the emotional side of things was just really taxing. It wasn't, a lot of people think that, you know, the worst part about being a vet is having to put animals to sleep. And it's actually one of the easiest parts of being a vet, because you never are putting an animal to sleep that you are not confident that this is the best decision for the animal's sake. It's like, this is the end of the road. There's nothing more we can do. There's nothing more I think we should do. This is how I can best help resolve this situation. The harder thing to deal with is when there's more you want to do, or there's different things you want to do, but you can't convince the people, or the people don't have the money to do what is necessary. So yeah, it's a lot of like having to deal with going home and thinking about, you have to be very good about separating your work and your home life, which I was not very good at. I would go home and think about my patients nonstop, would have dreams about my patients, and wake up going, oh my gosh, I should call the owner of Fluffy so that I can tell them, you know, like, let's try and increase this dose of medication. And at the end of the day, if something does go wrong, it's on you. And so that guilt and that weight can be a lot. And it was a lot for me, and it still is, which is why I work what's called relief right now, where essentially I only do, like, I work maybe 1 to maybe 3 days a week at different locations. And I essentially am like a independent contractor, where I just go into one location. If I don't like the location, I never go back there. If I do, I'll establish a relationship and might cover shifts for them. But that just allows me to kind of separate I don't have to have the continued worry and obligation on me about an individual animal. All I can do is, you know, I'm here for the day. I'm going to do the best that I can for them today. And then after that, it's going to be on their regular vets to kind of continue on, or excuse me, do not bite me, sorry, the cat. So yeah, that's what I've been doing now, because that emotional toll was just far too much for me. It really took its toll on my mental health. And like, there was a point where I like stopped working as a veterinarian full stop for a couple of months, because I had such massive like panic attacks just thinking about going into work. So yeah, that's unfortunately something that's happening a lot with our industry at the moment. I'm just kind of one of many.
So it's an industry-wide problem, that same aspect of separating, having emotional restraint, creating boundaries between work and life. It's a very serious, I mean, being a doctor is also very serious, but
Yeah.
at least, most of their patients have the ability to speak for themselves, and
Yeah.
that creates a very different situation.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know anything about this field, but I always imagine it's being like a pediatrician because
Yes.
you're talking to, like, as a pediatrician, I imagine you're talking to the parents and you're trying to convince the parents to do what's right for their child, but your patient is the child, and your patient can't always speak to you, can't always tell you what's wrong. Your parents don't always know what's wrong. And then, like, in addition to the emotion, like, a lot of the veterinary industry is suffering with, like, finances right now, in terms of um, a lot of private practices are struggling to get by and keep up with kind of these larger corporations that have amalgamated all these other smaller practices. And so these smaller practices are struggling to make a living, and to combat them, some practices are overbooking their vets, and that's compounding the issue. And then these larger corporations, some are great. I personally worked for a corporation straight out of veterinary school. And for me, that particular location was not good because it was also struggling. It was doing the same thing where it was trying to increase the number of pets we were seeing constantly. And there was a lot of talk about sales, which very few vets that I know get into this. And in fact, I don't know a single vet at this point who got into the industry because they're like, oh yeah, I'm a great business person and I love to sell, more products and wellness plans, and the corporations will usually justify it as, better medicine usually is more expensive. And that is, for the most part, true. But you have a nice, like, ability with animals where you can work around things. You can adapt to, oh, if you don't have the funds to do this, like, maybe we could try this medication and see for a few weeks, see how you do, and then we'll do a follow-up instead of doing a $200 blood test that might tell us nothing. But when I was in a corporate practice, it was very much pressured. I was very much pressured to, oh, no, push the test, like, push the test hard, because that will increase your average price per client. And that's something that, will make money for the corporation. And they would say, oh yeah, and it would feed back to you in form of a bonus. But it just, for me, for a lot of vets that I know, that combined with the, like, having to deal with an increasing number of pets, dealing with clients, a lot of times being understaffed, and just dealing with, like, that kind of emotional stress on a day-to-day basis has pushed a lot of vets out of the field. So right now, a lot of places are hiring because so many vets have left that there aren't enough incoming new graduate vets to fill those positions. And unfortunately, like, I graduated during COVID when everybody got a lot more pets. The shelters got emptied. So all of a sudden we have, like, triple the amount of pets normal. And then people are staying home more and looking at their pets and noticing things that they didn't notice before when they were going to work from a 9 to 5. And so all of a sudden you have so many more people coming in saying like, I saw this lump, or he's drinking a lot more water than normal. And that was a lot to deal with. And yeah, so right now the industry has been kind of in a continuous down spiral, because of like the general things I mentioned before, combined with like what happened with COVID. So yeah, it's what made me realize like I am not suited for this field, because I tried working on my like emotional resilience. I like went to therapy, started antidepressants, and like was feeling in a much better place, but being in that better place, I was still unhappy and still pretty miserable in the field. So I left, and well, I haven't completely left yet. I'm still in practice, and I'm much happier doing the relief work I do now, because it kind of allows me to bypass all those things I mentioned, like the emotional, like having individual clients, but also having to worry about making money. That's really nice that I just get to come in. I have a flat amount that I'm getting that day, regardless of how much money the practice makes or not. And I can just focus on, this what's going to be right for this pet and this client, and how can we fix it so that everybody gets the best possible resolution. And I make a lot more money. I have a lot more free time. So overall, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, but I still would not be willing to do it forever.
Okay. Do you make more money because you have more years of experience now, or is it because relief nurses make more money than general nurses at large corporations?
Yes, it's
I'm
because
sorry. I don't know why I said nurses. I meant veterinarians.
you're good. It's because relief vets make more money. Mainly because, if you're an independent contractor, the practice doesn't have to worry about doing matching 401k and health insurance. They're just giving you money.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, that's the downside, is that I do have to pay taxes 4 times a year. But other than that, it's really flexible. My schedule, sometimes I can just be like, I don't feel like working this week, and I don't have to. Or, oh, I need, like, I'm going to go on vacation. I want to make a few extra bucks. I can pick up more shifts as I need them. So it's because, like, one, they don't have to worry about, keeping you there, as it were, with like 401k and health insurance. But 2, they need coverage. If a relief veterinarian doesn't come in, they'll close for the day, which means they will definitely lose money. So it's cheaper to pay a much higher fee to a relief veterinarian to come in, and that way you can stay open. But you might not have the it might be a little more expensive than a regular veterinarian, but you're still going to be making some money rather than just closing for the day.
Okay. That makes sense. And one thing that's different about veterinarians than with doctors and nurses is that human hospitals, are required, even if the patient can't pay for their operation or their medicine, they are required to provide the care. And then maybe it'll come back in the form of a huge bill, or their insurance comes out and something will happen.
Right.
But the patient will receive the care. So a doctor is never going to leave a hospital knowing that there could have been something done and absolutely nothing was done. Whereas it seems like veterinarians, very often, there's not enough money for this particular animal, and then this animal is going to have to suffer because there's no money, and there's no rule that veterinarians have to supply justify care
Yeah,
for an animal.
100%. I mean, we are obligated in emergency situations to provide care, regardless of if they can pay or not. So if an animal comes in and it's seizing, like having a seizure on our doorstep, we do have an obligation to take it in and administer anti-seizure medications. If it's like, gasping for air, if it's having an anaphylactic response, any veterinarian, like, here's the thing. Oh boy, am I going to cause issues for people? If they are having a serious life-threatening emergency, we will do what human doctors do, which is, yes, we will take them in, we will administer whatever needs to be done, we'll rush them into the back and triage ASAP without asking you, how much money do you have? But I don't know that people know that. The thing is, as a collective, veterinarians are usually very empathetic. There's always exceptions, but oftentimes our empathy gets taken advantage of when people will just show up without an appointment, without calling in, and be like, hi, my dog is limping. See it, I'm here, I'm right there. And you have to learn to turn those people away. If you're like, I have I've the unfortunate thing is, if you have a packed day, and that's something I learned working at a corporation, is I used to say yes to pretty much everybody. I'd be like, because I'm like, I want to help the pet. I want to make sure that, we're giving them the care. And then in the back of my mind, because I was being really pressured by the higher ups to make more money, I was like, well, I want to help the hospital and make sure that because we were really struggling, and I wanted to make sure that if we could take some in, we would. But having to learn your limitations when you do take those in and realize, oh, now not only am I not getting a lunch, but I'm working a 12-hour day. Everybody's working overtime because we had just one extra walk-in that wasn't an emergency, but they didn't either have the foresight. I want to be kind and think that they just didn't. Most people don't have the foresight to think about calling ahead. But some people I know have simply just showed up with the entitlement and the expectation of you're a vet, take my animal. And it just can turn a okay day into a bad day, and a bad day into a really, is profanity okay on your channel?
Yes, it is.
Shit day. A really shit day. And so learning when to be like, nope, we can't take anymore. I need you to go somewhere else. Goodbye. I'm so sorry. I can't do this. And also oh yeah, it's just a lot to kind of handle. And I commend the people who do the job and do the job well. But there's a lot that goes on that people, we oftentimes will take the animals into the back and you don't see what goes on, and you don't see how we're stressing to calm your animal down, how we're trying to put a catheter in and administer drugs, trying to do whatever we can, and it doesn't always happen the way people would want it to happen. And having a lot of people who are really kind is great. When you have clients who are understanding, it means the world. Really, if that's the message I can get out to people, is just being a little bit patient and understanding that we are doing the absolute best we can. Very few people are trying to upsell you. I won't say nobody is, because I have seen people upsell shit that doesn't need to be sold to you. But for the most part, everyone's just trying to do their best, and it's always going to take a little bit longer and maybe not as smoothly as it would be in human medicine, because we can't tell our patients to, hey, stay still, I'm just going to poke you for a blood draw really quick, or I'm just going to do an x-ray. I need you to lie still, please. So yeah, I feel like I'm just kind of rambling about how much I don't like it. But
No, well, I mean, it's good for us to know. And a lot of people assume that veterinarians, and you already mentioned it, don't like their job because they don't like putting down animals and killing animals all the time.
yeah.
But it's much deeper than that.
Yeah. Definitely a sad part of the job. It's like it's not something you look forward to doing. But no vet is going to euthanize an animal unless they're like confident that this is the right thing to do. And it also is kind of like something I'm always curious about, actually, is like medics, or like human doctors, they're kind of like stances on like human euthanasia, because for vets, for us, most of us like animals more than we like people. So for us, most of the vets I've spoken with are pro like humanely euthanizing people if that's their decision, if they have like a terminal illness that they know is going to prolong their suffering. Like most vets are like on board with that. And I'm always curious to hear if like medics, what their opinion is, because the ones I've talked to have always been like, oh no, you do everything you can to save a life. And for vets, ours is very much, you do everything you can to prevent suffering. Suffering is much more of a greater evil in veterinarians' eyes than dying, because it's something that we have to deal with, almost on a weekly basis. You're going to have a euthanasia come in. Sometimes every day you'll have a euthanasia or two, sometimes three. I've had 3 in one day and it was not a good day. But having an animal suffer and having sometimes clients who don't want to admit that their animal is suffering, because for them it's hard to let go. That's really tricky to navigate around, because nobody wants to hear that they're allowing that their animal is in pain, that they have allowed this pain to happen.
Nobody
is like willing to have that conversation. Even when there have been times when people have come into me and I've been like, in my head, I'm looking at an animal that can barely walk, and I'm just like, what the fuck do you mean you don't think they're in pain? They can't walk. This is painful. This is bad. But you can't tell that to a person and expect any kind of cooperation with you from that point on. And that's where you like again, having emotional resilience and being able to like rein in your own, sometimes like anger at the person for like what they've allowed to happen, and understanding like, okay, they don't understand that this is bad, and like, let me explain it to them. And sometimes there's still people who, like, I've met who the dog has had a torn ACL. They'll be limping on it. I will tell them, we need pain medication. At the very least, most likely you should be going to surgery. And people always want to be like, oh, but they don't whine. They don't seem like they're in pain. And the best way I found to explain it to people is like, have you ever limped before? And if they say yes, I'm like, why? Like, does it hurt? Why are you not walking on it? It's not because, oh, I can't move my leg that way. Sometimes it is, but usually it's like, if I move my leg that way, it hurts. And some people will take that on and go, oh, okay. But other people are still really set because they don't want to hear that their animal has been suffering for, they maybe have not been in, this has been going on a few weeks and they didn't bring it into the vet until now. And they don't want to feel that shame of like, oh shit, I've left
Yes.
my pet suffer for so long. And so you have to be, even when you want to shout at these people, you have to be, I think you should be gentle and be like, so they're in pain, they're here now, let's get them some help. In the future, if you see this, please bring them in sooner. Please don't wait so long. Cat,
You
what are you
said
doing?
you said you feel like that's the right approach, but have you ever seen the show House? Are there
Yes,
any
yes,
house veterinarians that just unload on their patients?
yes. Not completely. I do know they're usually more seasoned vets. They're usually ones that have been in the field for a lot longer and have had it like up to here with people's shit. And so usually those vets, they're still really kind, but when you do come in spouting nonsense, they'll be like, no. And I have only a couple of times met people who like I'm convinced they're just like saying whatever they want to say so that they can defend themselves. Most of the time people just genuinely, I think, don't know. They just genuinely don't know. So I don't usually come in with that approach because I also have the like mentality of I really like educating the people who come in because in my mind I can like have them see the signs earlier, they can come in faster, it can be cheaper for them, and the pet doesn't have to suffer as longer, and then in the long run I don't have to deal with some complex medical mystery that has devolved because we didn't catch like kidney disease early on or something like that. So that's my approach. Some vets, like I would say more common than the house approach is like just kind of, oh, what I see from some human doctors of just like, oh, you're in for this, okay, we're gonna give you that. Like they'll charge you out on the way and we'll give you your medication. Yep, have a good day. Whereas I usually go a little bit more in depth of like, oh, he has a sore throat or he's sneezing. Most likely I'm thinking this, this, and this, which like we could do these tests or we could try on this medication and see how it goes. I usually recommend the medication first if you're having some financial constraints. Otherwise, we can try the test or you can try the meds. If it doesn't work, come back in a few weeks and you can try the test. But yeah, so usually doctors that are pressed for time will be like, okay, like you have this, well, I think you have that. Here's the meds. Goodbye. But that's not as common, I think. Usually, I don't get to see a lot of other vets work. Like, that's the thing, is I might see them in the treatment area and we talk about like, oh, I had this weird case. What do you think? But I don't go into the consultation room and listen to them talk to the clients and be like, how are you describing this to people? I can only see it in notes when I'll see like, why do they prescribe this medication without offering this test or that test? That's strange. And then being like, why? Or like a client will complain to me, oh, when I worked in corporate practice, I had one vet who he was like a good vet. He just didn't explain things to any of his clients. And so I would have clients coming in on the days that I worked being like, I have this medication. I don't know why I'm giving it. The dog's not getting better. And I'm like, oh, well, we should do this test. Oh, well, why could we have done that test last time? Yeah, we could have. I don't know why it wasn't offered to you. Like, because this is what I think is going on. And they'd be like, oh, well, I would have done the test. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm sorry, it wasn't offered to you at that time. You have to like put on your professional mask and be like, no, that's really a shame when all you want to do is point the finger and be like, that doctor there, I don't know what he's fucking thinking. But whatever. Yeah. So it's a lot.
It sounds like a lot. And it accumulates, I believe. Like if you happen to have that like once or twice a week, it's not a big deal. But then if it's like every day, multiple times a day, every week for your, 40 years, that definitely accumulates.
Yeah, it's like any kind of burnout. You can be okay for a bit, but then eventually it catches up to you. Unless you have a good like team supporting you, then that can really help a lot. But yeah, I mean during COVID, there was the doctor that I actually, when my dog was sick, when I was in college, the dog that like we had to take to the vet we took her to, her practice got incorporated into the corporation. And she had always been super warm, super caring, really lovely person. And she like quit in the middle of the day, like just walked away. She had like patients to see. There were still dogs that were in her care, and she just couldn't take it anymore and left. Like said I quit, left the building, never came back. And it was just like, at that time I was thinking about quitting. And so I have been like, wow, if like this professional who I looked up to, who had kind of like been the start of my interest in this field, is leaving, that might be a good sign that it's like this is like time to get out. I should get out. And I
And
left a month
you
later.
mean this is the corporate job, correct?
Yeah, that was a corporate job. I worked there for 9 months right after I graduated. And like that paints corporations as kind of the corporate practices as bad. They're not bad. Some of them do really good work. It just happened that the specific location of my practice, we didn't have, the staff was not experienced, so I was having to take on a lot more, and it was also kind of struggling financially, so that compounded some things that might have been just like a little bit irksome, having to think about like, oh, wellness plans, or how much am I charging clients, things like that. That might have been bearable in another situation, where became unbearable in that location. So yeah, I hope like not all corporations are bad. There is just like some that you have to be cautious of, because they may try and like push some things that aren't necessarily in the pet's best interest, in my opinion.
Yes. And like you said, it varies across locations for the same corporation. I
Yeah.
mean, when a corporation has 50 locations at 10,000 employees,
Mm-hmm.
you can, I mean, what's going to happen is something's going to occur at one, and then you apply that same action.
Yeah.
Everyone feels the consequences, but
Mm-hmm.
it really, is, you never know. So going
Yeah.
back to what you said, at the specific location, maybe there's another manager for another location that's a really good manager and does really, puts an effort in for their veterinarians,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes their veterinarians, day a lot better. But
Yeah.
that's
I
a
mean,
big maybe.
well, I have a friend who worked for the same corporation, and when I was struggling, I like called her up because I was like, "Hey, how are you? I wanted to get a read of, is it just me? Am I like just struggling because I'm not good at this, or what?" And she was having a great time. She worked at a completely different location. She absolutely loved her job, is still with her job. And
Wow.
yeah, so like you're absolutely right. It is like location dependent. Um, and like I know she does good medicine, so it's just like, but I mean that's true with you can do that with private practices too. I'm just speaking in terms of like the one location that I've worked at full time happened to be a corporation, and some of the problems I had working there. Cat keeps coming up on the table.
Wow. What a
Yeah.
naughty cat.
He knows he's not allowed. He knows. And he openly like lays down to be like, oh, but I want to be up here
Defiant.
and cute. Defiant
The
kitty.
defiant cat.
Yes.
So
Anyway.
before you went to that job, you had a unique experience in veterinarian school, and your veterinarian school was in Edinburgh, Scotland, correct?
Yeah, I went to Edinburgh for my veterinary degree, mainly because it was one of the only places I got in. I applied to almost everywhere because I was really worried about, losing my steam for school. I felt like if I didn't do veterinary school immediately, I would start working and wouldn't feel the desire, like it would be a lot harder to get back into school. So I got into Kansas, which is a great school, and the University of Edinburgh. And I was like, well, I can go to Kansas or Scotland, and it's going to be the same price. So why not go to Scotland? So I went to Scotland. My degree is technically, it's weird over there because veterinarians are bachelors, as are like medical students as well. It's a bachelor's degree. So you come straight out of high school into veterinary school. The like young kids, I'll just call them, they did their degree in 5 years. If you already had a bachelor's degree, you would get a compressed, the first 2 years would get compressed into one. And so you would have a really fast first year and you would do 4 years in total. So that's what I did with some other North American students, a couple of kids from Hong Kong, one from Beijing, one from South Africa. I think that was it. Yeah. And then we got incorporated in third year, we joined up with the rest of the students who were straight out of high school. And it became a normal, we sort of like stick with them for the rest of the time. Everybody sort of integrated. So yeah, it was a different experience for sure. Being around people who like, it's their first time away from home, and I'd already gotten to experience all the like fun partying side of college, and I was just kind of like a little grandma ready to like, okay, I study and I maybe go out once in a while, and some of these guys are going hard, and I'm like, ooh, I'm ready to like, guys, it's 10:30 at night. I'm ready for bed. But
in Europe, that's early.
Yeah, I know. I learned I was very American. But it was nice because I got to travel a lot more. Also, I like that the program, it has, so some American schools will make you track because, there's so many species of animals. So some schools like Davis, I know, they'll make you declare when you get in if you want to do small animal medicine or large animal medicine. And if you're doing small animal medicine, you're doing cats, dogs, all the like little pets. So you might be doing what we would call exotics as well. So like snakes, hamsters, turtles, guinea pigs, rats, mice, those kinds of things. And then large animal medicine. Go ahead. Birds. Yeah, birds too. And then for large animal medicine, you have a much more agricultural mindset. You're doing horses and cows, pigs, sheep. And what I liked about my program in Edinburgh was they didn't track, so you had to do all the animals. Well, they had like a few major categories of animals, but I didn't know for sure that I wanted to do dogs and cats. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do farm, and I'll really like farm animals. And so they made you learn all the different species, and you had to test on all the different species. And it was really nice because there's also a lot less competitiveness over in Europe, I would say. People are much more, well, I've heard some things. I did not experience a lot of competitiveness, and that was not the sense I got from the other UK schools. People are pretty much, once you get into vet school, we're all in vet school together. We're all there to study together, help each other out. Whereas in American schools, there's a lot of competition over who's going to get internships, who's getting the top grades in the class. For us, we just had to pass our exams, which was over like 50%, because the American schools will usually do it where, say you're studying the anatomy of a dog, you'll have one section on cardiology, which is the study of the heart. And once you finish your cardiology section, you immediately have a test on the anatomy of the heart. And then you move on to the anatomy of the lungs, and then you'll have a test on the anatomy of the lungs. Whereas in the UK, it was, we're doing the anatomy of the dog. So in that, we have heart, lungs, digestive system, every body system. And at the end, you have a test that includes all of those things. So they weren't expecting you to remember 80% of everything. Sir, stop. You're a nightmare today. Which was really nice because you just had to focus then on like passing. You didn't have to focus on being the best. And it was a lot to just pass as well. It was still very challenging. It was not like people were not getting 90s on these exams. Most people were getting maybe in the 60s, and we were happy with that. And we had some exchange students come over from Colorado who were just shocked because, one, we helped each other during clinical rotations. Like, we were not there to sabotage anybody. We were there to like make sure everybody got whatever was needed to be done. And two, we had a really good work-life balance. We got every Wednesday was a half day. When we were on our clinics, we worked 9 to 5, and that was it. Whereas if you're a student in America and you're in rotations, you are like the bottom of the barrel. You're worse than an intern. You are doing all the grunt work. You are working insanely hard, much harder than the actual veterinarians are, in the hopes that you can, eventually rise to an intern where you're slightly less than a student, and then work your way up. But I really liked how UK set it up. It was just a very, more supportive environment, which I feel like is what you want in medicine. I never understood why, like, you would want sleep deprived, hyper competitive people when, like, the goal should be you want the most well-rested person who has a team behind them, who, if they don't know something, which you're not going to know something, will always happen. You are going to encounter a situation where you see an animal or a human, if you're a medic, and you don't know what to do. And you have a team who's like, oh, I've seen this before. Or they have some knowledge that you have. And you can rely on them to be like, help me out here. And that's like what it is in an actual clinic. That's something that I actually do like about veterinary medicine, is you're very much part of a team. Everybody's like there. Ideally, if you're in a good team, that's the thing. Everybody should be there to support each other. The vet should be like the kind of head of the team, but by no means does that mean you should be barking orders at people. Like, your techs have a lot of information. A lot of them have a lot of experience too. And they oftentimes are interacting with the animal more and will pick up things that you didn't notice. So like, I'll do an exam, bring an animal back for like, hey, blood testing, and I'll have techs pick up like, hey, doctor, did you notice this lump? I'll be like, oh, nope, didn't notice that lump. Thank you so much. And sometimes you get people who be like, oh, sorry, didn't want to step on your toes. And I'm like, no, that's what should be happening. You should be having a cohesive effort to like make sure that this animal, and it doesn't matter if it's coming from the vet or from the tech, Like, it should be, you know, a united front, and like, we're going to do whatever we can. And I'm sure that happens in medicine too, but like, it just never made sense to me that you would want to encourage students to be hyper competitive to then go into a field where teamwork is absolutely necessary, you know? Like, anyway, I really valued my education at Edinburgh because of that. And I also got to travel a lot more, got to see some cool things. They make you work on farms for part of our extramural studies, is what they were called. So, like, I worked on a pig farm for a couple weeks. I worked on a dairy farm. You had to go lambing, so I helped like lambing, which I birthing lambs for the season, which I did not like, but I did. Worked on.
Why don't you like it?
Oh, it was another situation where it was like a bad farm that I landed on. They just were really malnourished sheep. Like, I reported the farm afterwards to Humane Society because the sheep were really underweight. They didn't have, like, sometimes you'll have moms rejecting the lambs for whatever reason. And so you'll have to bottle feed the lambs yourself. We only had one bottle, which doesn't sound like a bad thing, but you have a lot of, like, lambs can get sick, and like, if you're using one bottle on a sick lamb and going to a healthy lamb for the same thing, like, you're just spreading disease everywhere. We had like sometimes the sheep have a hard time giving birth. They might be really low on calcium or low on sugar, so you'd want to give them an injection of like a calcium supplement. We only had one needle and it was rusted, and yeah, it was just really gross, and we were working like really long hours, really hard work, and we ran out of food. Because they didn't supply us food, and they left us a car occasionally to go to the shop, but we didn't always have time to go to the shop because there were 3 of us for 1,500 sheep, and each sheep has about usually 2 lambs, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. So it was a lot, and like, by the end, I just was hungry. That was mainly it. By the end of the last week, I was having 2 meals a day, and one meal would be like a can of tomato soup, and the other was like a small bowl of rice with a slice of like deli ham, because, and then I was like trying to find any kind of fat or calories. So we had ketchup and mayo, and I just like doused the rice with ketchup and mayo because I was like, yeah, I need some form of food and fuel. And I like lost like 20 pounds during that. So yeah, that's why I like lambing. But other people had good experiences. That was just, that particular farm was a bad place. The lambs themselves.
That farm off the beaten path?
No, it was, oh, that was the other thing. It was run by, it was in Wales. It was run by this family, and the like dad had been a farmer, and they had been farmers for generations, but he kind of retired and left it in the care of his daughter and her husband. The daughter and the husband had never partaken in any of the farming. They lived in London most of their time and, you know, worked from home. So they decided, oh, let's just move out back to the farm. We'll still work from home, but how great to raise the kids, you know, in the countryside. So they didn't know anything about really the farming. They just had a shepherd who was in his 70s and was also about to retire and had been doing his shepherding the same way for the past 50 years without like change. So, you know, like, they just were like, oh yeah, it's fine. And I remember they brought some of their friends from London onto the farm to see the lambs and see the lambing season. And these sheep are strong. You like, essentially, so what you do, they're all in pens if you're doing indoor lambing. Sometimes they'll be outdoors and you have to go on ATVs and find the ones that are in contractions. and then you tackle them. You jump off the ATV and you tackle them, and you like help them pull out. And you're only doing this if they have not, if you notice contractions and you've like marked the sheep and they haven't passed any like babies in the next like hour or so. So indoor lambing, they're all in pens. So you have a little bit of an advantage there, but that means you like go into a pen and you need to like herd them into a corner and see the one you want. And you like either use a crook, which is the like long pole with the, like, you know, Little Bo Peep?
Yes.
Yeah, the pole that she has a long curve on the end, you use that to hook around the sheep's neck and like curl their head down so that they flip and fall down, and then you can help assist them. But they're strong. They're about, yeah, they're about 50 to 60 kilos, so 100 to 120 pounds, which for me, I'm 4'10" and like 130, maybe 120. Like they're my size. So I'm having to like, and I got one sheep and I was like wrestling it out of the pen. And these people from London came down and I was fine, but to them it did not look like I was fine. And so they go, oh my gosh, like we need to help. And they start shouting and yelling, which freaks the sheep out more. And so it struggles and gets away. And they're like, are you okay? And I was just like, I am fine. And they kept letting their little 7-year-old girl jump in and play with the baby lambs, which not a good idea. Moms are very protective when their babies are just born if they haven't rejected them, and will headbutt you. And it can hurt an adult man. It's gonna knock out a 7-year-old girl. Like, and we kept telling them, I kept like, eventually I went to the parents and I was like, so Sophie really wants to come help with lambing. I can't have her there. They're like, oh, but she's fine. She gets on her own. I was like, I understand that. I cannot be liable for her. Like, it's really, because what she would do is she would scream that she wanted a lamb. And we'd be like, well, we have to wait for the lambs to like get born. We can't just, make them give birth right now. She's like, but I only want a black one. I was like, Jesus, child. And the parents thought it was so cute. And it was good because I've always lived in cities, so I never like experienced farm life. But people don't realize it's dangerous, dangerous work. Like, farmers are constantly getting beaten up and like just dealing with it. And people think, oh yeah, cute little lambs, cute pigs. They are cute. Yes, they're very strong too, and they are dangerous. Like, you need to know how to work with them. Can't just let your kids go running around willy-nilly because they're gonna get hurt, and then I'd be liable anyway. So lambing was like, I had no people who had great experiences though. Like, their farmers cooked for them. They gained weight because they had such good food. And it is like, some people love the experience because you do get to like help little baby lambs. I mean, it's very cute. But yeah, I was just, I don't like being dirty. I don't like being wet. I don't like being cold. And that's what a lot of like lambing is.
Wow. And not eating well, not being in a nice, like a decent place. That is a huge deal.
Yeah.
It takes a toll.
Yeah. It was definitely a challenging experience that I'm glad I don't have to do again.
And that probably pushed you away from large animal veterinary services.
Yeah. A little bit. I mean, as a vet, you're not usually, especially for sheep, unfortunately, you're not usually helping with lambing. It's more of, what pushed me away from it is like, you have to shift your mentality from like, oh, this is an animal that I want to help get better regardless, to how much does this animal cost? How much is the treatment I'm going to do cost? Because for the farmers, the animals are their livelihood. If the treatment you're saying is going to alter their finished product in a way that it is not worth, like, doesn't balance out the cost of the treatment or keep them profitable, there's not much point. That said, like, farmers do usually really love their animals and take great pride in taking care of their animals, but it's just that shift, which is a lot harder. You have to go to population medicine instead of like the individual. So now you're thinking about, like, okay, I'm not just here because one cow has problems with walking. I'm here because the herd we've been seeing more incidences of walking problems. So we need to figure out, is this infection? Is this poor husbandry, meaning like they're walking in really slick mud or maybe their own poop, and trying to like work out, okay, how do we treat, how do we like advise like changes on the farm to make sure this doesn't happen in the future? How do we like essentially, and then a lot of it is making like, how do we increase the productivity of these animals by ensuring that they are healthy and that their welfare is good. So like, I don't know if you've seen that, like cows, people are introducing like big brushes for cows now.
For
But
their
that's,
body?
yeah. It's
Yes.
something that like some vet researchers discovered, like cows really, really like being brushed and they really like being massaged. And after like they introduced these brushes, they produced more milk and they had lower incidences of disease. So like that is a way that's in the farm world can help. But I just wasn't so good at being able to like disassociate myself and being like, okay, seeing the numbers and the business side of it. I've never been very good at that. I got into this because I like really love the animals, and so it was hard. I strayed from farm animals because of that, because I didn't like the idea of. I didn't think I would be good at just seeing them as numbers, which you're not just seeing them as numbers. I didn't think I'd be good at the business side of it. And then horses, I knew I never wanted to do. I don't really like horses. They're very big. They're very skittish. They're very dangerous. And
Yes.
a lot of times the people who have them have a lot of money, which means a lot, if something goes wrong, they get very, very mad. And yeah, I never wanted to go into horse medicine. When I finished my equine rotation, I like cheered because I was like, I never have to touch a horse in a medical way ever again. I can just go, oh, there's a horse, nice horse.
I feel like horses are the one animal that have lost a lot of use. A lot of in the last 100 years, like the horse went from the most useful animal in the world to kind of, there's really no point to have a horse. They're useless.
Yeah. I mean, in our area of the world, 100, I feel like there are some people who still have ranches and like it's easiest to use a horse. But like in Southern California, no. People who have horses are like rich, posh people who like
Very
want
rich, very posh.
a fancy lawnmower, essentially, is what one of my teachers called them. Oh no,
Wow.
he called alpacas a fancy lawnmower. But yeah, like I know like in Morocco, like one of our professors, our equine professors, used to do veterinary work in Morocco where like they still use horses and donkeys they use a lot.
Wow.
And those are livelihood things. But yeah, for like developed countries like the US and the UK, they're just expensive pets, to be honest. And people really like that.
Yes. And unlike cows and chickens and pigs, those are, and you called them numbers, products.
Yeah.
Those are at the
Things
end of the day, what? Things we
things we like
consume.
eat. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, even, the cow's milk is a product itself. So you really, it's not about taking care of it is about taking care of the animals, but it's really about maintaining the product's well-being,
Exactly.
security for the product, making sure, the businessman, which is the farmer's, his business is running profitably because,
Exactly.
unfortunately, he has to make a profit in order for that to actually function.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm sure, like you said, you have to be very aware of that. So if this is a, farmer who has antibiotic free
Mm.
cows, does that change the way you can uh, treat the cow, like based off of how the, specific requirements by each farmer?
Yeah, 100%. If they have, so yeah, having like organic grade anything, you're usually going to be using a vet more as a like you're going to be using them more in terms of how to design your farm and how to make like husbandry changes. I think I don't want to misspeak here. Because I'm not super confident in what the rules are regarding organic animals. I'm pretty sure like you can still use antibiotics, but there's a certain withdrawal period, and you have to be using them to treat a specific illness. Like back in, maybe like 2050, let's say 50, let's be generous. 50 years ago, we used to be using antibiotics as like supplements essentially because we were like, oh, yeah, we'll just make sure they're constantly not getting infections. And I think with organic farms now, like say you have a chicken that's ill, like you can still have a vet come in and be like, here's some antibiotics, but it's like targeted, like I am trying to treat chlamydia. I am trying to treat what's another chicken illness? Oh God, I don't know any chicken illnesses. I'm trying to treat something specific. I'm not just like, oh, here's some antibiotics. And then there has to be a certain period before you can slaughter that animal to go to human consumption. But that's the same with any medicines. I don't know the exact time periods, but I do know that it would change how you would administer medications or if you would at all. Which is like why sometimes I'm not like I love the idea of organic things, especially like vegetable crops and fruits, because then you're not like having pesticide usage. For animals, I'm a little bit more hesitant just because I feel like there are times when like if an animal is sick, it needs antibiotics. Like you should give it something to treat it. But again, you don't really know the rules of organic animal farming. So I'll have to like look into that and get back to you. I know there are rules.
Okay.
They are.
Yes. If you were in that field of veterinary, it's called not
Veterinary medicine.
animal veterinarian medicine. If you were in
There
that
you
field
go.
of veterinarian medicine, you'd probably know.
Yeah, I would probably have to know. But yeah, I just, like I said, it's much more of a business, and I've never been a good business person. I just
Yes.
want
And,
to focus.
most veterinarians and doctors, they're not business people. They want to help. They want to help for doctors, human beings, for veterinarians, animals. And
Yeah.
it's not an easy path, especially in the USA to start out on. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's if when someone's committing to that, they usually suspect that they have some sort of desire to help and to assist and to provide care for
Mhm.
others.
Yeah.
And so, Katie, you said that you are considering leaving leaving this industry, are there any other careers or paths that veterinarians are shifting towards, can shift towards, or is there anything that you're particularly thinking of?
It's a good question. I don't know about the general veterinary populace. Like, I don't know what careers people who have left are more drawn to. I can only really speak for myself. I'm interested right now in academia and a little bit more research, but not necessarily veterinary related. I'm more interested in like marine biology, climate change kind of things, because I still really want to help in some way, but I need it to be a little less individual. Like, it can't be I need to help Fluffy because if Fluffy passes away or whatever, or suffers because of something I did or didn't do, like, that's really hard. But like climate change, ecosystems, one, I'm super interested in, and two, I feel like it's an important area to be focusing on. So that's where I'm kind of drawn right now. They always said in veterinary school, oh, you don't have to be in practice. Like, you can go on to do anything else with your degree. So I think they told us something that like an astronaut was a veterinarian at one point. There are like, sometimes people will go into like the pharmaceutical industry as a veterinarian. Some people will go into like research, specifically with like animal research. But that's as far as I know. I'm the only one of my class at the moment that I know that is thinking, my graduating class, that has like determined to like leave this industry. Most of my friends are still within the field. Not a lot of them seem really thrilled by it. But yeah, I think I would have to talk to some more senior veterinarians who are leaving, because I don't know where they're going, to be honest. They must be going somewhere. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. So there's multiple people leaving right now. And you mentioned this at the beginning, but like the industry is facing a problem of veterinarians leaving.
Yes. It's a really, it kind of, what was it during COVID, the Great Resignation?
Yes.
That sort of happened in the veterinary field as well, because of, I think, the factors of like COVID that I mentioned earlier about people getting more pets and having such a large influx, just compounded a lot of things, and people left. Everywhere I keep getting phone calls or messages from my previous the corporation that I worked for, asking, hey, would you be interested in coming back? And I've told them multiple times, no, not interested. I don't want to. Almost every practice I have worked at as a relief veterinarian, so, which is probably let's see, 1, 2, I want to say like maybe 10 or 12 places that I've worked at. Every single one of them has been looking to hire vets. Every one of them is down at least like one vet, maybe even 2 or 3. It's like, and it's not just in the States, because I do have some friends back in the UK. The same thing happened over there. People are like, the industry is really, really hurting for veterinarians. And the sad thing is it's putting a lot of pressure and toll on the ones that are remaining. So it's likely that I think it'll continue to happen, because, people can only take so much. And when we have new grads coming into the field, you really, really need a mentor. You really need somebody who is going to be kind of like looking out for you, but also there as a sounding board to be like, hey, I have this case. I think I want to do this plan. Do you think that sounds good? And for them to kind of, you know, correct you, guide you, give you tips and tricks. Like, it's super important. And since we're having a lot of people leaving the field, I kind of worry for like the future generations of vets, because I'm not sure that there will be a lot of those mentors left for them. Hopefully there are still plenty of people who've remained, but there's definitely a deficit right now. Everyone's really there's still a lot of pets, and what's happening is essentially we have general practices and we have like specialty and emergency facilities. So think of your general practice as like your dog has been coughing a bit, or has just started limping, or is drinking more water, something like that. You go to them first, and that's what I do. I do general practice, and we kind of assess things, and then if it's something we can treat, we treat. If it's something more complex or more life-threatening, we refer to an emergency facility or a specialty facility. So what's happening is a lot of the emergency facilities have not had vets to cover, which means that we will try and refer cases that are emergencies that need emergency surgery or something like that to emergency places, and they will not have the vets. They won't have a vet to take, like, to do the surgery. They won't have a vet to triage. They simply cannot take it, or they'll have a waiting list of like, oh, I think 6 hours was the longest I heard. Where
Wow.
like,
And you don't relieve for emergency, right? You only
I
relieve for general.
Yeah. Emergency relief, you can make even a lot more. But like I said, you need some more specific training if you're going to be doing emergency work. Like, you should ideally have done an internship, maybe even a residency in emergency medicine. And so, like, emergency vets have left, general practitioners have left. So now when we try and refer things, it might be like our patients have to wait longer, they can't be seen, so we're having to be like, okay, well, maybe we'll try ourselves, or maybe we euthanize more patients than we want to. Or like, which happens a lot because emergency facilities are expensive, and so some people just won't go to emergency. We'll just kind of say, no, they're too expensive. What can you do here? And then other times, you know, you'll have those cases I mentioned where people will walk in or call the day of to be like, oh, hey, my dog or cat is suddenly doing this. Can you see them? And you're like, no, I'm fully booked. I can't. We can send you to, like, there are 3 other hospitals near us that are veterinary hospitals, and they'll have been like, we tried, we couldn't get in. And so, like, I had one patient the other day who was very sad. He had a lot of things going on. It was a German Shepherd. And like, his owner noticed something was wrong on Monday and couldn't get an appointment for him anywhere until Friday. And by Friday, I mean, I don't think it would have made a whole lot of difference, but it's just an example of like, we had to put him to sleep on Friday. It's just like another example of like, people are having to wait a lot long, because we don't have the vets to see the amount of pets we have. So it's getting backed up. People are getting booked up a lot faster. Whenever we're referring people to like surgeons, or other like type specialists, usually I will always tell them like, go now, schedule an appointment like today so that you can get put on the wait list, because their wait lists are usually like a month long. And so for some of these things, it's like, dog has a torn ACL, needs surgery. And it's like, well, now we're going to have it wait a month on pain meds, which is not ideal, until it can get this surgery. Or, oh, its eye is like about to rupture. We need an ophthalmologist to do something now. It's like, well, the ophthalmologist is booked 6 weeks out. Like, so yeah, I really think that I don't know if it's at a tipping point, but it's definitely in a downturn. And I think like the only way it's going to change is if we start paying the technicians and the nurses more, because they're the ones who like really can take a burden off of the vets themselves. You have a good technician, you can see a lot more patients in a day than like if you have. Well, when I was working at the corporate, there was one technician who I really got along with, and she and we could see 17 pets in a day easily. There was no problem.
Wow.
Just she and me. When I had 2 other technicians like working with me, I could maybe see 12, maybe on a good day.
Wow.
And so like having those, go ahead.
What does a technician do? And how does one help?
Yeah. So a technician they can do a lot of things. They can intubate a pet for you. So if you have a surgery, they can essentially administer the anesthetics and then place the tube down the throat, down the windpipe, which will allow us to ventilate the pet. For dental procedures, they can clean the teeth, they can remove teeth, they can suture things. They can suture things for surgeries as well. They can administer vaccines, and they can administer other medications that like have been, actually assistants can do that as well. But they can administer other medications that like the pets consistently come in for. So that's what legally a technician is allowed to do. Now, an assistant can do pretty much all of those things. A veterinarian just has to be present as well. And they will all be able to place IV catheters, draw blood, run blood work, monitor anesthesia for you. They save me so much in terms of like, they usually discuss money for you. So they will I will say, this is the plan I want, these are the tests I want, and they'll be like, okay, and they'll put together an estimate and go over the money with the client. They will essentially, like, if I say I need blood and I need urine, they will be the ones to collect it while I go in and see my next patient. And then I'll come back in and they'll be like, here's the blood and here's the urine results. And I'd be like, okay, see it, got it. We have a UTI where you don't have kidney disease. Here's we're going to put them on this antibiotics. Here's the dosage. Here's how long I want them to go for. Can you input this into the computer? And be like, yes, I'll make an estimate, talk to the client. And I'm like, good, they're good to go. So like when you have
curiosity, how do you get urine on demand from a pet?
So you can either do a free catch where you take them for a walk and you catch it with a cup. Okay. I don't like that one as much because it's challenging. Or you can do ultrasound guided, which is what I really like, where essentially you put them on their back, you have an ultrasound, you have a very long but like thin needle, and you essentially can visualize their bladder. And that one I like because sometimes if they've just peed or they don't have urine, you don't have to waste your time like waiting for them to pee. You can see like, oh, their bladder's tiny, they don't have anything for me. Never mind. We'll either send them home with a collection kit or they'll come back another day and we'll try. But also with the ultrasound, you can see like the thickness of the bladder. You can see if there's stones within the bladder, any masses. And so once the bladder usually sits like maybe that like far below the skin. So you just boop, poke it through, pull it out, and that way you get a sterile sample. And so if you find bacteria in that, you don't have to worry about, did it come from like, you know, the end of the urethra where like their genitals are, or is it actually in the bladder? You know for a fact, like, oh, we have bacteria, you have a UTI. So yeah, technicians do a lot, receptionists do a lot, but like paying technicians so that you can keep them and that they stay is like, it's so important. It's really, I think they're so undervalued and they often don't get paid a lot. And most of them work multiple jobs. I'm like, oh, if they just were paid more, like you could keep good technicians there and vets would have the support they would need. So like within the industry, I think that's what needs to change. Outside of the industry, I think people need to start viewing their pets as like not just like they need to start thinking about financial costs. Like sooner or later, something is going to happen. Like unless you're fully planning on never taking your pet to the vet, you will probably have a veterinary visit once in your pet's life. And it might be at the end of your pet's life. And then that's always really sad to be like, I'm so sorry. I know I'm putting your pet to sleep, but I have to charge you money for that because these drugs cost a lot of money. And so like just having that in mind and not seeing pets as like an accessory to your life, but like realizing that, oh, I'm going to get a cat, I'm going to get a dog, like that means vaccines, that means annual checkups, that means you know, like saving money or getting a health insurance account, pet insurance for them, so that if something does go wrong, like it's there for them. And I know that that is a very like privileged mindset because not everybody can afford to save for their pets and not everybody can afford pet insurance. But there are like, I think then you just have to be like cognizant of the fact that like still, if something happens, if you want it treated, it will cost money. It's going to be expensive. There's like no other way around it. Unfortunately, like I wish it didn't cost money. I wish I could just do things for free, but that is not how capitalism works, sadly.
No. And to go back to what you said, it's unfortunately not a right. You know, having a pet, it's not an accessory. And sometimes when someone wants a pet, they think of it as an accessory. Like, oh, I'm gonna have this pet. I'm never gonna be sad because I'm always gonna have a pet around. All my friends, you know, I love when I go and see my friend's dog. My friends are now gonna love me because I have a dog and be more willing to hang out with me. But it's like, this is a very serious it's very serious one. These are actually cognizant animals, so that animal has sentience. It feels something, it feels bad things often, and so we just have to be aware of that and just be able to, I don't know, just before we get the pet, understand that this is a sentient animal. It's like us. It needs to go to the doctor.
Yeah, that's all. Like, that's all. And then the main, like, I think the main trap people get into is like puppies or kittens. And like just being like, oh, I found someone on Craigslist who is selling puppies for like $150. Great. And that is the number one time where we see pets coming in with like serious illnesses, really bad illnesses, and like things that are going to be upwards of like a couple $1,000 because like, you know, somebody just said, oh, I'm going to have puppies and I'll sell them and it'll be great, and didn't know like, oh, there's some serious, like there's parvo, there's distemper, mainly parvo, to be honest. But like people just think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna get a cheap puppy. I think knowing like, hey, puppies are like the like youngest animals, those are the ones that are going to have the most, young and old will have the most expenses, because when they're young they need vaccines, they need like to be spayed or neutered, and they usually like are going to be more prone to illnesses when they're younger. Same when they're older, they're going to have all the old age things. And so like thinking like, oh, I'm just going to get a cute little puppy for my kid for Christmas, and like it's only $150 or $100, whatever. Like, and then you have the tragedy of bringing home a pet. It's super unwell. Your kid thought you brought home a lovely puppy for them, and now you have to make the trip to the vet, who's like, okay, so this is going to be very expensive, very, very expensive. And you thought you were taking the easy way out by getting something inexpensive up front. I'm not saying go to like a reputable breeder and buy things. Shelters will make sure that their dogs are vaccinated as well. But just being a little bit more cautious of where you're getting these animals from. Because like these people are kind of like making money off of their lack of medical knowledge from the like oh, my dog had
The breeders?
not all breeders, no, I'm talking about like, we call them backyard breeders, because they're people who like have not done any research. Their animals just like were not spayed, were not neutered, whatever, got pregnant, have dogs, maybe they like have had puppies before, and they're like, oh, awesome, like I can just make some money by selling these. Like the people who don't like do the research and know what's, and then you have other, oh god, crazy breeders who think they know everything and know everything, like will say, don't listen to your vet. I had my first week as a vet, I was threatened to be my mentor was like shouted at by a breeder on the phone saying, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue everyone in your hospital because you're lying to these people and telling them that my dog is the puppy I sold them is sick, and you're going to try and falsely charge them with a bill that they don't need. The puppy's going to get better in like a couple of days. And we were like, no, this puppy has a serious life-threatening condition and is most likely going to die, and did die. But
Wow.
like the people who like it's just, if you're going to buy a puppy and you get a weird feeling, don't do it. Like there's no rush. You can always like go after Christmas and go to a shelter or find a breeder and establish a conversation. Like people who just make these snapshot decisions of like, now we're like, look, there's a puppy, we're getting it. At like places where you're like, there doesn't seem to be any like, I don't know, like it doesn't seem super clean. The dogs, like there are a lot of animals here. Just think a little bit beforehand, and it will save you such heartache. And like it's really sad for us too when we have puppy cases like that, because everyone loves puppies for the most part. You come in,
Yes.
and when you get a puppy that comes in and you're like, bloody diarrhea, hasn't eaten, super tired, your heart just sinks, because you almost always are like, oh, I know what this is. I need to do, hey, stop scratching. It's parvovirus. It's like life-threatening.
What is parvovirus?
So it's a virus that adult dogs can have with no symptoms, no signs. But if puppies get it, and usually they'll get it from their mom, it gets into their digestive system and it attacks they're like these little villi that are kind of like little kelp that live in the digestive system, and it's to increase the surface area for absorption. And what they will do, because they can absorb all along their surfaces. So what the virus does, it attacks these villi, it destroys them, so you can't absorb any nutrients. You can't really absorb water either, so they get really dehydrated. Puppies have a much higher metabolism and a higher need for nutrients. So essentially they're like starving to death, because even if you feed them, they can't absorb it. And then once it's destroyed the villi, it will then start attacking the white blood cells and start killing white blood cells. And then they usually succumb to like secondary infections from their gut. So it's a really serious virus, one that like if we suspect a puppy has it, I like put on a full isolation gown, I put on gloves, I put on a hairnet. I have to look at my schedule and see what other puppies am I seeing for the day. Okay, I'm going to avoid touching as many of these young animals as possible. And then you have like bleach to disinfect yourself. You have Parvosol, which specifically kills the virus. And the virus will live in the environment for 6 months. It doesn't care if there's water or sunlight. So if you have it, what often happens is breeders who don't necessarily know about it, the mom dog usually has the virus, will transmit it to the puppies. And the puppies are usually doing fine when they're feeding off of mom, because mom has antibodies for it. And they sell the puppies. The puppies go home. Now they don't have mom's antibodies anymore, but they still have the virus. And so they start going downhill. And either the owners don't contact the breeders or whatever. And so like they'll sell off all these puppies that seem well. The puppies get home and like within the next day or two, they start getting sick. But a dog can have a litter every 6 months. So even if you like manage to, usually what will happen with these breeders who are not reputable is they'll sell off the puppies and be like, okay, time to get my dog pregnant again. And so 6 months later, if there's still any of the virus around from now the puppies and the mom, the next round of puppies gets it. And it like continues the cycle. So Parvovirus, you can't really treat. You have to treat the symptoms. So it's very expensive to treat, because what it means is you hospitalize the puppy, you put them on an IV catheter, and you give them fluids to prevent the dehydration. You give them antibiotics to prevent secondary infections. You might give them sugar if they're really like low blood glucose, and you have to try and feed them. Because the only way that the villi regenerate themselves is if they have nutrition inside the gut. And that can take, and so it's just intensive nursing care, and that can take up to a week, but that means a week of hospitalization, which gets very expensive very quickly. So most people don't have that money. If you have the money to do it, like their chance of survival goes up to like 75%. If you don't, it's more like 50-50. Because a lot of people will try to do it at home, give them like water at home, give them food at home, we'll give them long-lasting antibiotics. But it's not, usually you're expecting that they pass away, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate. But theoretically, if they were to stick on the mom's breast milk, the antibodies would be fed to them and they wouldn't get sick? Or is that still a rare case?
So like after a certain point, the antibodies, how much depth do you want this in?
You can pull, yeah, go deep.
Okay. So when the puppies are first born, the mom produces something called colostrum. This is true for all mammals. And colostrum is the milk that is like jam packed with nutrients and antibodies. And that's made within like, that has to be drunk within the first 24 hours of life. So you drink that, and then your immune system, dog's immune system, cow's immune system, any mammal, their immune system then gets full of their mom's antibodies, as well as the nutrition. After about 24 hours, the barrier in the digestive system that allows these antibodies to like seep through into the bloodstream seals over. So you can't absorb antibodies anymore from your mom, but you can absorb nutrients. However, you will keep the antibodies you've already absorbed from your mom for up to 8 weeks. So they'll be circulating in your immune system while your own immune system is kind of developing. So a lot of times, vets, we will not vaccinate animals until after they're 8 weeks old. And the reason for that is if we give them a vaccine for a disease that their mom had antibodies to, whether their mom had the disease or had the vaccination, their mom's antibodies will attack the vaccine and destroy it before the puppy's own immune system gets a chance to see the vaccine and develop their antibodies for it. So what happens is usually around weaning is when they start selling puppies. Weaning is like 6 to 8 weeks of age. So it just so happens that it coincides, the weaning process coincides with when the mom's antibodies are declining. After about 8 weeks, there are no more maternal antibodies in your system. It's all on your own immune system at that point. So these puppies get parvo from their mom, might get antibodies for parvo from their mom. They have these antibodies circulating for up to 8 weeks. At around 6 to 8 weeks, they get sold. So then their own immune system has to start fighting the parvovirus. And by that time, they're usually with their new family, and then they start getting sick. So that like also explains why sometimes if you bring your pet in and a young animal, and you'll say they'll have already been vaccinated, but your vet might look at how old they were when they were vaccinated and be like, no, we should vaccinate again. It's for that reason, because they will probably have they might have their mom's maternal antibodies still in the system, so the first vaccine didn't work. So that's why like sometimes older vets will do like 4 boosters of the vaccine. I prefer to do 3 because I would prefer to be like, let's just wait until I know for sure. And that way I don't have to poke them more than they need to be poked. And so, yeah, a lot of times people get frustrated when they come in and I'm like, they're vaccinated too young. This vaccine means nothing. Like they need to be vaccinated again. So yeah, that's kind of what happens with like how parvovirus develops in puppies, unfortunately. Yeah.
So the colostrum has to be drunk within 24 hours and
Yeah.
after birth, and then that colostrum holds the antibodies, and those antibodies will last in the puppy's body for about 8 weeks, which is
Yes.
also the time they are usually sold off to their eventual owners.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's perfect for the breeder because they don't have to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, there are many breeders who are really on top of their game, but you don't need anything to be a breeder. You don't need to like go to school. You don't need to like have studied anything. All you need is a dog that hasn't been spayed and another dog, and you can be a breeder, and so like there are definitely people who are doing it right and making sure that their animals are healthy and clean, but there are other people who are willing to take advantage because you can make a buck because everyone likes puppies and people will pay for puppies or kittens not as much. It's usually puppies. Yeah. So
And it's up to us because the money we spend is a vote. And so if we spend money on negligent breeders, then we're voting for for continuation of negligent breeding, and we're promoting negligent breeding. But if we, like you said, are aware, it's very tough, especially,
Yeah.
usually both instances where I've gotten my dog, it's been like, I want a dog. And so we kind
Yeah.
of go get a dog.
Hmm.
So, but it's very important that people are aware of how their dog is being bred, and
Yeah.
if it's a healthy dog or cat.
And like something I wish, I don't know that a lot of vets would do this. I would love to do this. Um, if you are thinking of getting an animal, I think it would be really great to just go to your vet, go to a vet, be like, I have some questions. What do I need to know? Um, because then, like, that's the thing is like, I have all this information because I went to school for 4 years, but like, I can't expect everybody to have that information. It's more of just like, sometimes you can get a feeling if something seems a little sketchy, trust your gut and like go with that. But also, if I can give you questions to ask your breeder, like, please ask me, because I would tell you, like, ask them, oh, like, have you had instances of parvo? Do you have vaccines like that you are giving the mom? Do you have vaccines that you're giving the puppies? How old are you giving them the vaccines? Where do you store the vaccines? That's the other thing. You don't need to be a vet to administer vaccines. You don't need to have any license at all. You can just buy vaccines, and if they're your animal, they are your property. You can give them vaccines. That doesn't mean you have to know how to store them properly. That doesn't mean you need to
Wow.
know to do an allergic reaction. So, like, just having those basic things of like knowing, okay, like, have they had, and like, I'm not saying anyone's going to admit to you of having parvo. Like, that wouldn't be a good idea for them. But if they do, or if they are like, oh, you don't need to worry about parvo, that's a red flag. That you should be worried about parvo. Like, especially if you're getting a puppy that's around that age of like 8 weeks old. Like, if the breeder themselves is not concerned about parvo in general, not just to say like with their animals. If they're like, oh, I wouldn't worry about parvo with my dogs. We make sure they're vaccinated. Their mom is vaccinated. The dad is like vaccinated. We keep it very clean. That's one thing. If they say, oh, don't worry about parvo. No. Parvo is very serious.
Okay.
You should worry.
Just like someone who's like, don't worry about COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, we should be a little concerned. Like, hopefully these dogs are fine. So the sad thing is a lot of people get duped because the puppies seem fine when they get them and they'll just go home. And then, yeah, they hit it at that curve where the mom's antibodies go down. Benjamin, stop jumping
Yes.
up on the table.
So, Katie, you mentioned, but people can be more respectful and more patient with their veterinarians. They can be aware of how they obtain their new pets and make sure that, the breeders or, whatever distributors they're getting their pets from are responsible. Are there any last words or thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience?
Honestly, no. I think I've pretty much talked your ear off. Just, keep in mind that like it's a tough time for the industry right now, so we're just as frustrated about like waiting times and things as you guys are, and we're all just trying our best.
My guest today has been Katie Stein. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Katie.
Thank you.